From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
The U.S. House of Representatives is a rough place for Democrats these days. Last November's electoral wipeout left the party with its smallest number of congressmen in nearly 70 years. One of the survivors, Rhode Island's own Jim Langevin, now in his 7th term. With the Republican-controlled Congress debating cybersecurity, the Patriot Act, and much more, how does a Democrat stay relevant? This week on Newsmakers, United States Congressman Jim Langevin.
Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the panel is WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi. Congressman, thank you for joining us on the program. And as you were listening to that, you were correcting me. You're in your 8th term.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. But thanks for having me on the program.
Was it your 7th re-election?
Yes, 7th re-election.
So I think that's 14 years is where we are, right?
I'm my 15th year.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
well,
so.
we want to get it right.
It's not a math-based show, Congressman.
Not how
I know, but I know you strive for accuracy.
We do. So we wanted to correct that,
Yeah.
and not where I intended to start the program. So why don't we start with some breaking news right before we came into the studio this morning, and we're taping this program on a Thursday morning. There was some breaking news. A federal appeals court in New York called the NSA's bulk collection of phone records illegal. Essentially, they're saying they overstepped what Congress had authorized. Look, you have defended the NSA in the past. What now? Did the courts get it right, or are you still satisfied with the level of oversight?
Well, the two things that they were asked, they were going to look at either the constitutional question or whether it was statutorily authorized, and what the court ruled, and I haven't done a deep dive on this yet, but what they have ruled is that it was not authorized under the law. So even though there were checks and balances in terms of the court had to approve when those records could be queried, what they're saying is that it was not authorized under the Patriot Act, that if the Congress wants to go back and look at that and specifically authorize it, that's another thing, but it wasn't authorized under the Patriot Act. What I can tell you is that there is a deep sentiment in Congress right now that NSA bulk collection is not going to be allowed anyway, even irrespective of the court's ruling. And the Patriot Act expires at the end of this month, and the Congress is moving to look at how we reauthorize it. But NSA bulk collection of metadata is not going to be something that is going to likely be authorized going forward.
Again, is this a change for you, though? I watched a town hall meeting you had almost 2 years ago. Like I said, you defended the NSA, saying it stopped a lot of this type of program, stopped a lot of terrorist attacks, and you said you were satisfied with the oversight of the NSA by the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Are you changing that now?
No, I was satisfied and still am satisfied with the oversight, because it did require a court order in order to query that data. And so there was sufficient oversight. And all the reviews that took place, it didn't say that anybody went outside that lane, did anything that was not at the time understood to be authorized. Now the court has ruled that it was not authorized under the Patriot Act, not that it was unconstitutional, and they didn't rule on the constitutional question as to whether that could be done under President's constitutional authority. But again, they punted on that question. But the bottom line is, I want always our intelligence agencies to act within the confines of the law, with strict oversight and checks and balances, and both with the Congress was involved with in terms of oversight, and with the court through the FISA court that looked at these related issues and authorized them, that everyone operated within the confines of the law as they understood it at the time.
As you point out, the Patriot Act is expiring at the end of this month,
right,
and it seems like there's some rare bipartisan support to change it. And this is the first time the Patriot Act is being examined again in the post-Edward Snowden era.
Right.
Where do you fall on this? Do you think it needs to be altered, or do you think, as some do, particularly the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, he thinks it should just be extended as is?
Yeah. There's going to be some modifications, no doubt. Well, the ending of the NSA collecting bulk metadata. So what will happen is the telephone providers will keep the records for a period of time, and the court will authorize a query of that data, but it will not be the government holding the data, the metadata. It'll be the telephone providers. So that's the way forward, is kind of the agreed upon preliminary look at how they're going to authorize it.
And as I said, that Congress is re-examining this again. I realize it's expiring, but it's under the magnifying glass because of Edward Snowden. Is he a hero or a traitor?
Knowing what he took and the bulk and the vast majority of the information that he stole and has likely given to the Chinese and to the Russians, he's not a patriot. I'm very angry at what he stole and how he damaged U.S. national security. Again, most of what he took was not relating to anything to do with NSA or surveillance. It was other national security programs. Now, that information has not come out because it doesn't fit into the rubric of the entities that he's working with that want to get that information out. So that part hasn't really become public. But I've seen a lot of it, classified data, classified programs that I can't even talk about, unfortunately. But it did great damage to our national security, and that's unfortunate.
No issue probably you're more closely identified with at this point than cybersecurity. You've been talking about it for years. It's getting more attention than ever with the Sony leak, the Anthem hack, etc. You're actually later on today, as Tim said, we're taping Thursday, going to the Rhode Island State House with Governor Raimondo. She's going to unveil an executive order related to this, and you're going to be there. Can you give us a sense of what this is and why it's important?
Well, cybersecurity is a critical national security issue, but it also has broad ramifications because there is no country on the face of the planet that is more dependent or uses the internet more than the United States or the American people. And much of our critical infrastructure, for example, the way that the electric grid operates, or water and sewage treatment plants, our telecommunication systems, our banking system, all dependent on the internet. Now, years ago, when I first did a deep dive on this issue, and I was very involved with cybersecurity and calling attention to vulnerabilities that we faced as a nation in cyberspace, not many people really paid attention or cared about it and didn't really see the relevance or that really even considered that it was important. But as time has gone on, and you outlined some of the real high-profile data breaches that have occurred and has compromised individuals' personal and private information, their credit card numbers, bank records, medical records, and such. And obviously the Sony hack that occurred showed the damage that can be done when bad actors penetrate cyber networks and steal this information or compromise information for their own purposes.
So the governor wants to do an executive order to create, I guess, a new panel around this.
Right. So this is obviously a national security issue that I brought attention to. But on the other side of it, which is an opportunity, is that this is a jobs-related issue, and that we don't have enough people going into the cybersecurity field. We need more of them. So one of the things that I would like to see happen, and I've spoken to the governor about this already a couple of times, is positioning Rhode Island to be a cybersecurity center of excellence, if you will. So we already are doing good things with for example, the cyber disruption team, and that's it's a public-private partnership, state police, EMA, you have various companies that are involved in this, looking at our critical infrastructure here in the state, how to harden it, protect against it, and also recover if there is a ever major cyber attack. But beyond that, we also have great colleges and universities in the state that are developing important cyber education programs. So there are states like the state of Maryland that has created a cyber center of excellence. And I want Rhode Island to be a go-to place. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse and I, for example, are in lockstep on raising the awareness and working on cybersecurity-related issues. And so we have the congressional leadership. We want to get the state leadership as well as our businesses involved with creating a cyber center of excellence in Rhode Island. Now that's a sort of a very nebulous term, and it can take very many different forms. So what the governor is going to be looking to do in her executive order is create this commission that will basically look at how we position Rhode Island much more effectively in being a cyber center of excellence for our state, both from a security and also a jobs and education perspective.
With cybersecurity, is the best defense a good offense here? You know, should companies, we think about Sony and what happened to them, should companies have the ability to hack back, to attack hackers?
No, they should not. And it's actually, there are provisions and things that we're working on that would prevent hacking back. And look, I understand that the need, the desire to get even. Companies may feel that they were wronged, but it's not wise for that, there would be like equivalent to vigilantism, and we need that could have broad ramifications that could spark other, not only diplomatic but obviously even security problems that the tit for tat that could go on. Right now, we have very powerful cyber weapons, and for the most part, those weapons are only authorized for use at the very highest levels. It would take ostensibly presidential authority in many cases to carry out a counter cyber attack, if you will. And I think at this point, rightly so. Now, as time goes on, it will probably become more institutionalized about what is permissible with offensive or defensive use of these weapons. But we're such a sort of a nascent stage of making extensive use of these capabilities. And so right now it's held, if you will, at the very highest levels. I don't think it's a good idea for companies to hack back.
For a lot of people at home, this is very nebulous, but where it hits close to home is if their identity has been stolen or their bank account has been hacked. That's where it's tangible to people. What does Jim Langevin do to protect himself from any of this kind of hacking personally, if anything, or are we sort of out there hopelessly swaying around in this Ethernet?
No, there are things you can do, and again, it comes back to we're only as strong as our weakest link. So practicing good cyber hygiene is a really important thing. For example, changing your passwords, making sure that you've got software protection on your own computer. So making sure that you're updating your patches when it says it notifies you that you have a software upgrade update that you need to apply. Well, you should do it as soon as possible. So those are the type of things that would be good. Being obviously careful the type of websites you go on. That if there are things that are not very approved websites, those are things that you can look at. And the Department of Homeland Security, by the way, has a good list of things that you can look at to practice good cyber hygiene. But this is it's a real problem, both from an individual's perspective, in terms of protecting your own credit card or banking information, and which can obviously be vulnerable. But it's also a real threat to our economy. There was a study that was done by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, as I recall, just a couple of years ago, that to quantify the economic impact on the world and the United States, that they estimated that over $400 billion annually it costs the world economy, both in terms of intellectual property that's stolen, jobs that it costs us, and also the amount of result of cybercrime that occurs. So when credit card information or medical data is stolen, that has a real economic consequence. So over $100 billion of that's directly attributable lost in the United States.
We're going to take a break on the program, and when we come back, we're going to talk about at least our favorite topic. We're going to dive into politics. Our guest this week is U.S. Congressman Jim Langevin. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my right on the panel is WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi, and our guest this week is U.S. Congressman Jim Langevin. Ted.
Congressman, the question we always have, do you plan to run for re-election next year?
Yes, I do.
Do you think you'll run the year after?
We'll take it one term at a time. But I am enjoying the job right now. I'm working hard for the people of the state of Rhode Island. Obviously, there's always challenging times and challenging issues that we're dealing with, especially when you talk about things like getting our economy back on track. Obviously, we're not where we want to be right now. We still have a 6.3% unemployment rate in the state. It's still above the national average, which is just around 5.5%. And we've got work to do to get people back to work. And one of the things that I'm working on is closing our skills gap, getting people the skills that they need for the jobs that are available right now.
All right, we'll let you do the sum speech when we're closer to the election.
but I'm still passionate about the job, and so I plan to keep doing it as long as the people of Rhode Island would like me to keep doing it.
I'm sure you have political aides who've looked at this. Do you think at this point Rhode Island will lose a congressional seat after the 2020 census?
It's certainly possible, but it's a convoluted formula. Generally the rule of thumb is that you have one member of Congress for every 500,000 people that a state has in it. So we have just over 1 million people, so therefore we have 2. But it's not a hard and fast rule. And remember, we only have 435 members of Congress in the whole country. So obviously the numbers don't add up that you just have one for every 500,000 people if you have to stay within the 435. So as it stands right now, I believe there's about 10 other states that would have to lose a congressional seat before it got to Rhode Island, but it is certainly a distinct possibility.
House Democrats and now more recently the Senate haven't really fared all that well under President Obama. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, in fact, on this program, said that the president is in part to blame for the, for the House and now the Senate losing control. Do you agree with that? Has Obama been bad for House Democrats?
Well, I mean, it depends on the issue. I mean, the one thing that I think the president needs to work harder at is reaching out and building relationships. He needs to do a better job with Democrats.
What's the rush?
And,
I mean, seriously, it's 6 years,
yeah. Well, because you need to obviously build coalitions and partnerships and try to reach out and get along with people in order to build those bridges, if you will. And so the president could definitely do a better job in that respect. But we also, remember, are in one of the most divisive and partisan environments that I've ever seen. Doesn't mean that sometimes some good things don't happen, and they have in this Congress. Finally, we got a clean Homeland Security funding bill that came to the floor and passed with a strong bipartisan vote. We just had a big victory with fixing the Medicare reimbursement rate for providers. I've been working on that for 15 years. That
sounds like a vote of confidence in Republican control. No, they're able to get things done the Democrats couldn't.
It's about bringing the bill to the floor. That's the issue. That's the difference. And it's one person who makes that decision. It's the Speaker of the House. Now, if he would bring more bipartisan things to the floor, more bipartisan bills would pass. I mean, immigration reform is a perfect case in point. Last Congress, it passed with a strong bipartisan vote in the Senate. Had that bill come to the floor, it would have passed with a strong bipartisan vote in the House. We never even got that opportunity because the Speaker of the House decided he was not going to bring it to the floor. So those are the rules. Unfortunately, those are the rules we have to play under. But I believe that under Democratic leadership, we'd see more bipartisan issues come to the floor.
Well, speaking of Democratic leadership, two of your colleagues from Massachusetts, Mike Capuano and Stephen Lynch, recently suggested part of the problem for House Democrats is your leader, Nancy Pelosi, and that it may be time for her to go. Do you think it's time for her to move on?
Well, I would say this. We can look at different sports coaches over the years, and when teams are doing great, the coach is doing great, and when the team is not doing great, you've got to make some changes. And so certainly I would say that we need to look at are we making progress or are we not making progress? And so I think
you're down fewer seats than you've had since before the Korean War.
Yeah, and so I think when Leader Pelosi, if she does run for re-election and she comes up, she's going to have to make the case to all of us about what the plan is going forward and how we're going to pick up seats in the House, and that's what we base my decision on.
It sounds like you would be open to a change in leadership. You would consider someone else at this point.
I am certainly open to hearing a plan that's going to get more Democrats elected in the House of Representatives. Right now it's not happening, and I think we need to have that discussion.
But wasn't the time to do that also after the last election when you got wiped out again and you're down to 188 seats?
Well, we need to look at, as a caucus, what our strategy, our message is going to be going forward. I think we need to focus a great deal, again, on economic development and creating job opportunities. I talked about what I'm working on in terms of closing our skills gap in the state, and I co-chair the bipartisan basically the commission, the caucus that does career and technical education. And as a result of my bipartisan work on that issue, I've worked with a Republican from Pennsylvania that has increased Perkins Act funding by $52 million after a few years of cuts to Perkins Act funding. We were able to, in a bipartisan way, reverse that. And those are the kind of things that are going to lead to results, and that's what I'm focusing on, is results and getting things done. And so, again, focusing on our economy and jobs has got to be job one right now.
But that's what she always says she's focused on, Nancy Pelosi.
I don't know that we have that message strong enough right now, and I don't know that that we're, as a caucus, getting behind one message. And it's leadership in a sense that sets the tone, if you will. And that doesn't mean that we're not working on other things. And for example, I've been a leader on cybersecurity that's protecting individuals' information, privacy, as well as their records. I'm also focusing on things like, again, career and technical education, national security related issues. These are things I'm working on. The caucus may not always be focusing on those specific things that I'm working on, but I think that what I'm working on is a broad message that appeals to people.
When your colleagues in Massachusetts, I mean, that was on the record. It was, I believe, on WGBH when they said that. So it wasn't something, said sort of off the record or anything like that. What was the reaction to that up in Congress? Is there sort of a, when you go after leadership or you say something like that of your own party?
Yeah, I can't say that it was a major topic of conversation. It was, one member's opinion certainly, and I'm sure there was some buzz within the caucus. But we're obviously busy focusing on doing our job right now. We're not even in the election year, so maybe it would have been a bigger splash if it were in the election year. But it was a significant comment, and I know both Mike Capuano and Steve Lynch very well. I respect them both, and they're entitled to their opinions. I think that we need to look at all options right now, and so I'm not saying that they're off base. I'm saying that we need to have a kind of a candid discussion within the family right now, if you will, and decide what our best strategy and message is going forward, and who is best to lead. Former governor and one of your congressional colleagues, former Senator Lincoln Chafee, announced he's exploring a run for president. What was your reaction? I heard that. Yes, I was certainly surprised by the decision of Senator Chafee to want to run for or explore the possibility of running for president. But I am firmly behind Hillary Clinton. I have a great deal of respect for Lincoln. I have considered him to be a friend. But I've been a longtime supporter of Hillary Clinton. I co-chaired her presidential campaign here in Rhode Island when she ran almost 8 years ago now, and I'm proud to support her again. I think that the country and Hillary Clinton in particular are on the verge of breaking a glass ceiling, and that we're going to see the first woman elected president of the United States. And I think it's a long time past that happens. So
Politico reported there's been an outreach effort by the Clinton team to Democrats in Congress. Have you had any meetings with Mrs. Clinton or Mrs. Clinton campaign team at all so far? We have had discussions with her people already. I've been on a conference call with top aides to Senator Clinton, and we've been in pretty good contact with their folks, and I expect to play an active role in her presidential campaign this time as well. It seems like it's gotten off to a rough start for Mrs. Clinton. You've had these revelations about her email account. You've now had these questions circling about the foreign government donations to the Clinton Foundation. I mean, do you have concerns about any of these stories that have bubbled up in the last few weeks? Well, I think those are the questions that she's certainly going to have to address and answer, and they will certainly be addressed in due time. But other than those things, I think that the campaign is actually off to a pretty good start, and the things that she's focusing on, going out and meeting with groups of people, real Americans from various walks of life, and hearing what their various problems and challenges are and difficulties. And obviously one of the things that she's clearly focused on is this issue of job creation and strengthening our economy. We have a shrinking middle class right now. There's no doubt about it that it seems like the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, the middle class is shrinking, and we need to change our economic policies and directions and focus in this country. We're a consumer-driven economy, and there's no doubt that it's the middle class that really drives our economy, and they're under so much pressure these days, both in terms of finding good-paying jobs, but also being able to go to school and get the best education possible. And you've got a Republican Congress right now that is cutting for the sake of cutting, and they're cutting the areas that hurt investments in things like infrastructure, in education. We talk about Pell Grants, and also we talk about health care, for example. The recent budget that just passed would cut a significant amount of money, but they would do it by creating a voucher system for Medicare that hurts our seniors, it hurts people with disabilities, it hurts children. It's not the proper way to budget. I've supported a budget that is more broad-based, that's going to get us to a point both of certainly much more responsible spending, but also proper investment so we grow our economy, because that's the way we get our fiscal house in order. Sticking with Secretary Clinton in the email flap that Ted brought up, curious, do you keep a personal email account? I have two accounts. I have a government account, and I also have a
personal campaign account.
So that wouldn't surprise too many people. The big issue here, and I'm sorry, we have just about a minute left. The big issue here was she used the personal account for State Department business. Do you use your personal account for congressional business or anything like that, or do you strictly stick with your congressional account?
For my government business, I use my government account, and for personal or campaign-related things, I have a campaign account. So it's two.
Do you manage your own server?
Separate thing. No, I don't do that.
Which would not be good cyber hygiene, if I remember right from the first.
Yeah, actually, very briefly. Do you think she put cybersecurity at risk?
In 30 seconds.
So I don't know the level of security on a personal server. And the other thing I would say that I guess it wasn't even under her name; it was under somebody else, and I think her answer was she did that for security reasons. But I'm not going to defend that use. I think it would have been better, clearly, for her to use the government server for government emails and for personal.
Congressman,
so
out of time. I really appreciate you having you on. I hope you come back soon. If you missed any of it, it's online, WPRI.com. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.